The V6 isn't exactly an engine configuration that German manufacturers are known for. However, it's fair to say that they've made some really good ones. Some of Audi's most popular cars are powered by a V6 engine, and there's also the beloved Volkswagen VR6 engines that we'll take a look at in this video. That said, as many well-made German V6 engines as there are, some have to be better than others. So today we'll be ranking every German V6 engine in a tier list format to see which one comes out on top. Let's get things started with Mercedes. The M112 was the first ever V6 engine built by Mercedes. Some of its design choices were well ahead of its time, with a full aluminum construction and forged connecting rods. Interestingly, the M112 used 2 spark plugs in each cylinder and a variable length intake. This design would later be morphed into the M113 V8 engine, which was placed into the A tier in a previous video. Some AMG versions came supercharged, making over 300 horsepower. Additionally, this variant was found in the Chrysler Crossfire SRT6. Over the years, these engines have proven themselves reliable, with decent performance figures, and should belong in the A tier. Moving on to the M272, this was the successor to the M112 V6 engine and is only found naturally aspirated. Much of the bottom end design is similar, but the heads and valve train are completely reworked with dual overhead cams and variable valve timing. Also related was the reduction to a single spark plug for each cylinder. By and large, this engine was more advanced, but some mild modifications did cause some issues. The first was the balance shaft, which is meant to control vibrational stability of the M272. The gears on the shaft wore out at a rapid rate, which eventually led to 2 separate class action lawsuits. Another known issue was the variable intake control lever, although there are cheap aftermarket solutions available. All things considered, the M272 definitely has some reliability struggle, but is otherwise a fair engine. The top of C tier would be appropriate. Mercedes M276 was the most recent of their high production volume V6 engines and was fairly different from its preceding M272. The V angle was reduced from 90 degrees to 60 degrees and the balance shaft was removed altogether. The timing system included multiple timing chains, a feature that led to issues predominantly on the early models. Such issues weren't common, although the consequences of this failure could get quite expensive. These engines were all naturally aspirated and made slightly less power than the M272 in peak form. As for other improvements, the M276 had a refined variable valve timing system and displayed incredible fuel economy. It seems that the M276 is a respectable engine for its time period and will go into the upper B tier. It's somewhat here for the fun factor, but the PU106B is what you more likely know as the Formula One engine that Mercedes threw into the AMG One. The total powertrain, including electric motors, is what produces the ridiculous 1,049 horsepower figure, but the engine alone accounts for just over half of that. More impressive is the specific power, considering a displacement of only 1.6 liters. This engine redlines around a whopping 11,000 RPM, with torque production unknown and not published by Mercedes. It's no secret that all the hype surrounding the AMG One had to do with this power unit, and it certainly delivered. If you get the chance to watch a YouTube video of an onboard lap with the AMG One, definitely go do so and you'll see just how violent and powerful this drivetrain is. Although not a mass production engine with only 275 being made, the PU106B will be our first entry to the S tier. The OM642 is the main Mercedes turbo diesel V6 and can be found in a massive variety of applications. First off, the torque production of this all-aluminum diesel engine is immense and helpful in some of the larger vehicles it's found in. There are also a few emissions mechanisms implemented that choke down power production. You'll find the occasional owner with minimal issues, but there are hundreds of documented cases of the following: main bearing shell failure, oil leaks, high oil consumption, and failed turbo actuators for the variable geometry turbo system. However, the turbo actuator issue is technically not on Mercedes, as that is an outsourced part. Regardless, the OM642 has its fair share of serious issues. Now, although the M272 had a class action lawsuit, the issues themselves weren't crippling. In the case of the OM642, issues like the main bearing failures can pretty much total the engine. That said, I think it seems fair that the OM642 would be below the M272 in the D tier. Now for Volkswagen and Audi, Offered as the smallest available V6 option in the C6 Audi A6, the 2.4-liter 24-valve BDW engine was a practical and efficient one. It had a block made from hyper-eutectic aluminum silicon alloy, which made for a low-friction surface. The BDW also included a forged crankshaft and variable valve timing. This engine was very similar to the 3.2-liter FSI V6 that we'll be covering later, but smaller in displacement and with multi-point injection instead of the FSI system. The 2.4-liter 24-valve V6 is smooth, not too powerful, and all around solid for a daily driver application. I would put the BDW engine in the B tier. Next up is the 2.5-liter V6 TDI, Volkswagen's smallest turbodiesel V6 engine, which was found in the early 2000s Passat. The torque production out of this little V6 is quite impressive. Most notably, the 2.5 TDI is known for a lack of reliability. This comes in the form of rapid camshaft wear, injector pump failures, and severe oil leaks. As for fuel economy, the engine is quite efficient, although that would be expected out of a diesel. There will always be cases in which owners have had little to no issue, but it seems that there are many out there warning of a wide variety of potential problems, landing the 2.5 V6 TDI in the D tier. The 2.6-liter 12-valve V6 that mainly came with the engine code ABC was one of Audi's first, found in a range of their 90s vehicles. It had a cast iron block with aluminum alloy heads and 2 valves per cylinder. Interestingly, the 2.6-liter V6 was square in design, meaning that the bore and stroke were equal. Even with a smaller displacement, the performance figures are subpar, and the power band has been said to have no low end at all. Additionally, the ABC engine can consume a fair amount of oil, but doesn't have any catastrophic issues, so the 2.6-liter will be going into the C tier. Next, we have one of my favorite engines here in the 2.7-liter 30-valve biturbo V6. The version found in the C5A6 and B5S4 has a cast iron block, 5 valves per cylinder, and dual overhead cams, which all allow for immense airflow capabilities. The flow of air into the combustion chambers is assisted by a biturbo setup, which makes for an incredible power per liter output. However, this engine is best known in the B5 Audi RS4, where it had been retuned by Cosworth to extract more out of it. This version got a larger intake manifold and a baffled sump for performance applications as well. It's proven to have above average reliability, and it makes the RS4 a blast to drive. Also worth mentioning is how unique these engines sound, which just adds to the entire experience. The Cosworth version made 375 horsepower all the way back in 2001 out of a 2.7-liter engine, an example of leading technology for that era. It would be hard to place the 2.7-liter biturbo anywhere but the S tier. The 2.7-liter TDI was Volkswagen's second turbodiesel V6 engine. Offered in some of their passenger cars, the 2.7 TDI was well matched to application, providing nice torque and a solid fuel economy. It's similar by design to the 3-liter TDI engine we'll cover later in the video, but it just has a shorter stroke and a few different modifications. The block is made of a compacted graphite cast iron, and it's also a square engine. Like many diesels, it used common rail direct injection with a very high injection pressure of roughly 23,000 psi. There isn't anything about the 2.7-liter TDI that will blow you away, but it's highly functional and it isn't a headache to own. That said, the 2.7-liter TDI V6 will go into the B tier. Made in the 90s alongside the 2.6-liter 12-valve V6, the 2.8-liter version is a very similar engine with just a longer stroke, accounting for the extra displacement. The two main variants were the AAH engine, which was made in the earlier years, and the AFC, which was the updated iteration. Being similar to the 2.6-liter, the same camshaft wear and oil consumption issues were present. The 2.8-liter makes marginally more power, although directly correlated to its displacement. These engines also received a variable length intake system like the Mercedes engines, along with mild valve train updates. The later AFC engines got lighter camshafts, which still had wear issues, and updated valves that included new seals in an attempt to eliminate oil from getting into the combustion chamber and being consumed. As a whole, the 2.8-liter has many of the same issues as its smaller counterpart. It is moderately better, especially the AFC iterations, but for the low performance and some of these issues, it will join the 2.6 in the C tier. Now for the fan favorite, the Volkswagen VR6 is one of the coolest products of German engineering that we've ever seen. In case you aren't familiar, a VR6 is essentially if you started with a V6 and reduced the bank angle so much that the cylinders were very close together. Then, if you had all 6 cylinders share the same head. The angle in most iterations was just around 15 degrees. Throughout the whole production run, the VR6 was built stoutly with 7 main bearings rather than 4, a forged crankshaft, and a cast iron block. It was also technologically advanced, with variable valve timing and Volkswagen's FSI, or fuel stratified injection system, found in the later and larger versions. The biggest 3.6-liter version also ran a really high compression ratio of 12:1, allowing it to produce about 300 horsepower while naturally aspirated. Like many German engines, as long as you keep up with the maintenance, the VR6 will last you a very long time. A huge following has been built for how different these engines are, how great they sound, and purely how fun they make a vehicle. Some of the later versions are named under the EA390 identification, and all of them are an example of taking an outside-of-the-box idea and executing it at an astounding level. The VR6 engine will be going into the S tier. The 2.8-liter 30-valve V6 of the late 90s was a decent daily drivable engine. The biggest difference to something like the 2.8-liter 12-valve was the 5-valve per cylinder design, allowing better airflow and thus increasing the engine's power production to a decent mark. This engine was somewhat of the gas-powered alternative to the 2.5 TDI for the Passat and was undoubtedly the better choice. It can still consume oil, but not as commonly or quickly as the 12-valve V6 engines. Overall, there isn't a ton to cover with the 30-valve V6, and it's fair to say it's a middle-of-the-road engine, something that you would find in the B tier. Moving on to the 2.8-liter V6 that came with 24 valves and FSI technology, the BDX engine has a positive reputation. The BDX was quite advanced, with variable valve lift now introduced alongside a recently debuted fuel stratified injection system. Hyper-eutectic aluminum silicon alloy is used for the block like the 2.4-liter BDW engine, and it also has a closed deck design, making these engines readily accepting of boost. As time has passed, the 2.8 FSI V6 has shown immense reliability and an impressive response to modification. Also included in the valve train is an automatic valve clearance compensator and intuitive mechanism. I think the grouping of the 24-valve V6 engines is where Volkswagen really started to find large success, and with good reason. An ultra-reliable and interesting engine, the 2.8-liter FSI V6 will go into the A tier. The final turbodiesel V6, known as the 3-liter TDI or the EA897, was Volkswagen's best, with many issues ironed out and heaps of torque to be had. It's fair to say that they went all out, with a compacted graphite cast iron block, a forged crankshaft, fracture split connecting rods, and a special piston design to assist in mixing air and fuel. Some modern diesel emission systems like the diesel particulate filter are present. That's a feature that I personally have never cared for because of the annoyance of DPF recharges, but even with these systems, the EA897 makes good power. Found in Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche SUVs, this engine is right at home. Some sportier applications like the S6 and S7 are also seen in recent years and are a testament to how well this engine has been performing. The 3-liter TDI EA897 V6 will go into the A tier. The 3-liter 30-valve V6 engine was the successor to the 2.8-liter 30-valve, taking over as the main option in the Audi A4, A6, and A8 of the early 2000s. By design, much of the engine's architecture is retained, but the 3-liter BBJ engine has lighter pistons and an aluminum block rather than cast iron. This makes for an engine that progresses the power figures while being a lighter package overall. The material changes to save weight and a longer stroke to get more displacement were the only major changes from the 2.8-liter to the 3.0-liter 30-valve V6. I would say this engine was a reasonable progression for a new decade and accomplished much of the same functions. The 3.0-liter 30-valve BBJ V6 should belong in the upper B tier. Getting to the final few engines of the video, this is where the most exciting ones are. The 3.0-liter 24-valve TFSI V6 engine is known as the EA837 and is a supercharged monster. Found in many applications including the Porsche Cayenne, the EA837 is a fully aluminum engine with a 90-degree bank angle. Fitted with an Eaton supercharger and FSI fueling systems, the EA837 makes strong power with a great torque curve. This engine has won various awards for its ingenuity and reliable reputation. It's worth mentioning that coolant leaks can rarely happen at the seals of the water pump, but this can be easily addressed. Many of Audi's most memorable vehicles, including the S4 and S5, have made their mark with the help of this powertrain. It's fair to think that the EA837 should belong in the S tier. The EA839 is somewhat the second generation of the EA837 design. Much of the engine is similar, retaining the 3-liter 24-valve structure. Most prevalent is the change from supercharged aspiration to either a single or twin-turbo setup. The single-turbo setup is a twin-scroll turbo and 3 liters in displacement, while the twin-turbo setup variants are actually closer to 2.9 liters, using a shorter stroke and a lower compression ratio. Audi's latest and greatest, along with multiple Porsche vehicles, have put the EA839 to use and gotten big power out of it. Over time, these engines have also won a few awards and are more known for water pump coolant leaks than the EA837s. It also seems that many who have driven both prefer the supercharger over the turbo setup for its low-end production. The EA839 is another incredible engine, but I do think when considering the time of production for each that the EA837 was marginally better. In the end, the EA839 is plenty deserving of the high A tier. Wrapping things up is the final 24-valve FSI V6, which came labeled as a displacement of 3.2 liters. Interestingly, the actual number is closer to 3.1 liters, and this engine is quite simply the BDX 2.8-liter 24-valve, but with a longer stroke. It was produced alongside the BDX and offered as a larger, more powerful version in many of the same vehicles. Technically, with the 3.2-liter making its debut slightly earlier, it was the first ever engine to use the fuel-stratified injection technology and caught a ton of attention following its release. For its innovation within combustion engine technology, above-average performance, and robust structure, this engine won a few awards upon its release. Like the 2.8-liter BDX, the 3.2-liter FSI V6 will fall into the A tier. So there we have it. Every German V6 production engine, including diesels, all ranked. I was surprised by how many great engines were in this category and enjoyed seeing what each of them were capable of. If there's anything that you would change or anything that I missed, be sure to leave a comment and let me know. I hope you enjoyed the video and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you did. As a side note, massive thank you to you all for getting the channel to 10,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching and have a great day.